I first played Arkham Asylum in 2009 and was thoroughly obsessed as a Batman fan. It was literally everything one would want, and I think that hype never really stopped, even with our first two Arkham spin-off games, Arkham Origin, a prequel to Arkham Asylum, and its baby brother Arkham Blackgate for the 3DS, a companion game set shortly after the events of Arkham Origins that took the Arkham Asylum's 3D Metroidvania feel back to 2D in a game inspired by older Metroidvanias with a similar labyrinthian setup to its 2D world. I got a 2DS just so I could play this game, and eventually Pokemon, to be fair, but honestly I wasn't a super early 3DS adopter. Only later did I really get a nice 3DS XL, this old blue X and Y model that is like the ideal way to play the 3DS. This thing's awesome. Upon my first playthrough though, I was impressed by how much it managed to cram into this little 3DS cart, especially since from a control perspective it took care to more or less pull Batman into the 2D plane without much tampering. But I think in the day and age of Nintendo Switch and Steam Deck with big modern games available to play fairly easily, I can't help but feel the cracks show a lot more than it used to, especially when I could play the console Arkham games on the go. The story of Arkham Origins Blackgate isn't all that deep. After all, it is a handheld companion to the flagship console game, Batman Arkham Origins. Thus, its story is more or less a handheld version of the game. Warner Bros. Interactive had Armature Studios take on development concurrently with Warner Bros. Montreal, who was developing the main game at the same time. Armature worked on some pretty solid handheld game adaptations, thus they had some experience in the field, working on a port of Metal Gear Solid before this game, and since working on ports of Injustice Gods Among Us for Vita, Borderlands for PS4 and Xbox One, and did some user interface features on Fortnite before being purchased by Meta to work their magic on the MetaQuest systems. Most recently porting Resident Evil 4 to Meta platforms as if Resident Evil needed more ports. Shockingly, this is their only foray into making a semi-original game, but I'm sure these days the porting game is kind of what you need to keep the lights on as a studio. That was briefly destined to make portable games a genre that is more or less blended with the console market due to increasingly sophisticated technology. Okay, so full disclosure, I went off memory and decided this game took place before Arkham Origins, and it wasn't till I started playing this game that I realized it was not a pre-prequel and actually a sequel to the prequel. Whatever, I played this before Arkham Origins, it is what it is, but Arkham Origins actually takes place before this game taking place 3 months after that game. Gotham's criminals are returned to Blackgate following Joker's defeat during Arkham Origins. After a tutorial of sorts, chasing Catwoman through Gotham, you end up in Blackgate, where a prison break and riot has taken place. Catwoman, now acting as a guide for Batman, sort of like Oracle in the original Arkham game, with Black Mask trying to kill the villains by overloading the power grid. Solomon Grundy ends up in the sewers, Penguin in the lighthouse with Copperhead, Deadshot trying to snipe Batman after he saves the warden of Blackgate, though after beating everyone else, you come to the Joker and beat his ass too. Though in the most shocking twist in the whole of the Arkham series, Joker is not actually the main villain, as we learn Catwoman is using Batman to free Bane, who she was hired to save. Anyhow, beat down Catwoman and the game ends. Though, depending on which boss you beat last, you get various variations on the story. I beat Joker last, so you see his escape, but if you beat Penguin last, you see his escape. Black Mask last, and well, you get it. You see Black Mask's escape. This seems really random and pointless, like these aren't really story changing, but cool, I guess. The end of the game sees Bronze Tiger and Copperhead joining the Suicide Squad, something that never really gets paid off unless you count the totally unrelated Arkham spin-off from last year.
Catwoman did do us a great service.
And what's that, Director Waller? Leading us to those two degenerates?
You see degenerates, Captain? I see soldiers.
Presumably, if Arkham Origins got a sequel of its own, it would have paid this off, but since that never happened and Rocksteady did their own thing with Arkham Knight and eventually the Suicide Squad games, it pretty much more or less went unpaid off. This game is designed to play like a handheld 2D version of the main Arkham games. I played this on an Xbox 360 through the Deluxe version, which can obviously play the real Batman Arkham games, but this game was designed to work on both the 3DS and Vita before being ported in this Deluxe version for home consoles. Regardless, the combat works like you would expect, just ported down, with your main moves being attack, parry, stun, and jump. On Xbox 360, the buttons are mapped to fit just as you played in the main games, making the transition pretty easy. The one big difference is that your health bar slowly auto-refills rather than you getting health boosts after beating encounters, the way the main game works. Grappling, maneuvering through vents, and hook shots similarly work pretty much the same. Gadgets are given throughout the game, batarangs, explosive gel, and more. Really, the core difference is the navigation between 2D and 3D. The maps are semi-on rails, which allows for this kind of 2.5D feel. There is a map, but I will admit, occasionally the screens are a bit confusing to navigate, and in the true Metroidvania style, backtracking as you gain new gadgets or keys is necessary to open new rooms to do basic things. The game being a little more puzzle-based to make navigation slower. The map also being in the menu, which, if I remember right, back when I played this on the 2DS, the map was on the bottom, which was so much more convenient than popping up the map every 2 seconds the way I had to here. The combat has some janky moments. I think it tracks targets a bit too hard, but for the most part it's impressively close to the games. I think given the staggering task they had, I can handle some jank, but what didn't really work was stealth combat. In the main games, stealth is an important aspect of the game. It's a puzzle of skill, really, and as you learn the ins and outs of the environment and gadgets, you can start to pull off crazier and crazier knockouts. This game is just janky. On a 2D field, it is so much trickier to make something like this work. At its best, it's overly complicated. At its worst, it absolutely sucks. For example, the Penguin boss battle, which sees you have to stealth take him out with drones and numerous enemies around, is so ungodly tricky and not really in a good way. You also start really feeling that lack of polish here and that enemy tracking. It feels like Batman occasionally doesn't go where you want him to, his gadgets don't really work the way they should, and these guys are tracking you down hard, cornering you and forcing you to take hits. Joker's fight was pretty fun though once you figure it out, but it's nothing spectacular. You just zip around dodging his moves and trying to grapple him. One thing that infuriated me was the lack of boss music on him, at least in the Deluxe version. Bronze Tiger is very easy. He lunges at you, you dodge, and then you punch. Enemy types pretty much pull over, and the way they are defeated remains pretty much unchanged as well. Regular enemies can get pipes and other weapons occasionally. Stun baton guys who you have to jump over and hit from behind. Knife guys you need to quick counter on. Gun guys who shoot. Honestly, it's kind of neat fighting these guys in the 2D plane. And I remember when this dropped, I would play this on the go a bit to kind of get the feel of the real Arkham games when I was at school or work or something, but I don't know. The combat just needed more polish. The puzzles are the main attraction and are often pretty solid, though I think in true Metroidvania style, this game sometimes feels like chasing down a path till you find something that you can use to go down another path you already explored to find something that you could use on the first path. And with very gray and muddy graphics, sometimes these rooms start looking the same and it all gets a bit confusing and disorienting. On that note, fully animated cutscenes were replaced with much cheaper motion comic style cutscenes, which I would be fine with. This is based on a comic book character, Batman, so a comic style cutscene is fine with me, especially on a smaller handheld title like this. I think my biggest problem is that the art style they chose for these sequences looks bad in my opinion, at least as comic art, since that isn't really what it is. It does have that dark, grimy styling of the Arkham world, but I don't know. I feel like you could have just grabbed like Greg Capullo or Tony Daniels and had a really badass replacement for these cutscenes that looked really true to the comics and cool, and that would fit better with the character. I mean, this game isn't like a licensed title. Warner Bros. Published the game and owns DC Comics. I feel like they could have very easily emailed the DC office and had somebody whip something up on the side for this title. Thing is, the guy who did this art was Cullum Alexander Watt, who is a working concept artist, and look, as concept art, this would be fine, but it's more of like a vibe and style type of thing, rather than like this comic booky feel they were going for, and I just think it's two totally different mediums of art, and doesn't look great here. Christopher Drake did the music for this game as well as the main Arkham Origins game. The music's the same between the two, and it has epic, kind of Danny Elfman style music from his Batman 1989. Christopher Drake is a Batman veteran, working with Warner Bros. On numerous animated films around this time as well, and you can see why he's still hanging around. It's not the most memorable music, but it's definitely Batman music, and they didn't have to hire one of those big names to kind of make some random portable title, and that's kind of what counts at the end of the day. It feels like Batman, and I like it. Something really cool about the costumes in this game is that each suit has their own attributes. Health boosts, attack boosts, you get the idea. The most tedious part is that many of the suits are unlocked by finding 5 suit components spread across levels. It gets to be a bit of a pain. Also, remember how I said there are different endings of the game that affect nothing and just randomly kind of exist to show you different versions of the end cutscene? Well, they also tied the end of game suit reward to that, which means you gotta beat this game 3 times, picking a different main boss to finish on each time. Literally nothing else would be different to get all the suits. It unironically will change nothing of your experience, but it's the only way to 100% the suits. The suits available are the default Arkham Origins suit, a Beware the Batman suit based on the short-lived animated series from the time, Black Lantern Batman suit based on a moment from the Blackest Night crossover event, Red Sun Batman from the Red Sun Elseworld story. To get this suit, you must beat the Joker last. The New 52 suit based on the then modern comics. To get this, you had to beat Penguin last. Batman 1 Million based on a possible future Batman. You can get this by beating Black Mask last. 0 Year is the New 52's modernization of Batman's original Golden Age comic suit, which was actually a really fun Riddler comic from Scott Snyder's run. This is exclusive to the Deluxe edition. The Dark Knight Returns suit from the miniseries of the same name. Earth 2 Batman was from the Earth 2 New 52 comic series, not to be confused with the Batman of Earth 2 or the second Batman from Earth 2. Shit gets a little weird in comics. Finally, you can unlock the 1960s TV bat suit based on Adam West's iconic look. These are such a pain in the ass to get. I wish they just sold them to me through DLC. I like changing suits. I don't want to find 5 components in each level and beat the game 3 times identically but with different final boss placements. It just isn't really worth it. I ran the Beware the Batman suit a lot because it decreased bullet damage by 50% and was useful considering how awful the stealth segments were. Made them a little more tolerable. Perhaps we're just really spoiled at this point in time with the Nintendo Switch and Steam Deck, but I can't bring myself to really like this game. Today I can grab my Switch 2 and play the Arkham games pretty much perfectly, or a Steam Deck. Why would I want to play this with the real deal being an option as well? At the same time though, this game just kinda lacks the polish. The stealth was attempted and they utterly failed at it, and even the hand-to-hand combat, perfected by Rocksteady in the main games, is kind of lacking here. It feels sticky and sometimes you get hit and wonder, what the hell could I have done? I was already locked in on a different enemy. You know, when I played it on the 2DS, I thought it was neat and had many of the same complaints, but it was a 2DS game, so I kinda shrugged at the time. Why would I play this today when there are much better 2D or 2.5D Metroidvanias? Why play this when I can play Arkham Asylum on the Nintendo Switch now? I think it's a general problem handheld gaming hit throughout the years. A lot of these games have just aged out of relevance, but following the release of the Switch and the discontinuation of the PS Vita, which mind you, had many console ports, it started to seem kind of pointless to make games like this. I think there were some impressive aspects to this game, but honestly, in 2025, it's just really not worth trying to track down.